In the framework of the European Culture 2000 programme, institutions in 4 countries, Belgium, France, Poland and the Czech Republic, collaborated in the development of a common methodology for the study of historical roofs, and church roofs in particular. On the initiative of the European Centre for Archeometry of the University of Liège, all the partners involved in the project shared their experience and specific knowledge. 3 workshops were set up, at Slavonice in the Czech Republic, at Amay in the Province of Liège in Belgium, and at Kurozweki in Poland. Engineers and architects from the Czech Academy of Sciences highlighted the evolution of roof structures in their region. Their contacts with artisan restorers enabled them to increase their notions of traceology. Through the detailed observation of medieval timber frames, it is possible to interpret the traces of tools on the wood and to reconstitute the traditions of craftsmen that had almost completely disappeared. The contribution of scientists from the University of Liège has covered notably the chronological and typological analysis of the timber frames. The typological layouts are standardized. They present the design of a main truss, a secondary truss, and a longitudinal section. They permit the development of classifications and the highlighting of evolutionary trends in a historical perspective. The Institute for the Walloon Patrimony has contributed its experience of conserving heritage sites. It also has the capacity to reach a varied public, from restorers of roof timbers undergoing training at the Pays de Dieu Development Centre to children in primary school. The conservation of ancient roofs, their restoration and fitting out, are causes that are particularly dear to representatives of the Centre for Research and Documentation of the Historical Monuments of Warsaw, who are specialists in ancient archives and documentation. The archaeologists of the Centre for Medieval Studies in Auxerre are emphasising a subject that has received too little attention: the conservation of materials. Although all these topics were the subject of an exchange of ideas, discussions and presentations, the 3 workshops essentially studied the timber frames. Whereas stone structures are the rule, the wooden structures remain for the most part hidden. For a long time, the history of roof structures did not attract the attention of architects or archaeologists. Over recent years, researchers have been involved in compensating for this lack of interest. The timber frame is a major element of architecture, common to all European buildings. A timber frame is an assembly of pieces of wood or metal. It supports or covers constructions and is part of the roof. The trusses constitute the essential element. They are wooden triangles assembled together, and they transmit the general weight of the roof covering to the vertical bearer elements, the walls and the pillars. Although there are several subdivisions, the timber frame can be divided into 2 groups: timber frames with rafters forming trusses, and those known as timber frames with trusses and purlins. In the former, the trusses are very close to each other, whereas in the latter subdivision they are not so close together. The purlins make the connection between the trusses. The rafters distribute the weight of the roof on the purlins. The selection of source material for timber frames is rather limited. In Belgium and France, oak is the most commonly used wood, whereas in the Czech Republic and Poland, wood from coniferous trees is used more frequently. Two techniques are used to work the wood: working low, the oldest method, and working high. Before cutting the trunks, they are oriented on the ground according to their future position in the timber frame. part of the bark is removed in order to be able to make a tracing on the trunk of the work using a charcoal-covered string. The first stage of the cut is the squaring off, or trimming, of the trunk using an axe. Notching, or cutting grooves, facilitates this task. The V-shaped grooves are obtained either by one craftsman alone, standing on the log cutting the wood perpendicularly between his feet, or by two carpenters, standing facing the trunk, taking turns to cut the log. The wood mass between the notches can be detached easily. When there is only a layer of 5 to 20 mm left, the carpenter can start the finish using an adze, a short-handled asymmetrical axe, by following the line traced by the charcoal-covered string. The quality of the assembly is crucial for the stability of the timber frame. The assemblies are the essential bonds which, when they are well designed, provide all the solidity of the ensemble. The majority of them are blocked using dowels. To make an assembly, the carpenter first traces the site in the middle or at the end of the piece being worked on. He then adds the pieces of wood with or without contraction of the material. There are two main types of assembly. The overlap joint. The parts are hollowed out laterally. The section of each part is reduced by half. The site of the intersection allows the other part to pass through. The tenon mortices. A hole is hollowed out on the female side of the assembly, the mortise. The projecting part, the tenon, penetrates the mortise. Laid out beforehand on the ground, the assemblies are marked to indicate their place in the timber frame. The marks differentiate the pieces of wood belonging to the different trusses. These marks are made with red chalk or charcoal, or are carved. Several different types of signs have been used over the centuries: symbols, letters, simplified Roman numerals, Arabic figures, etc. Until the 19th century, the hoist was the favoured lifting device. This was a sort of ladder that could be dismounted with the uprights converging at the top. It was used to hoist timbers and other construction materials. In certain major buildings, the lifting wheel or squirrel wheel used with the hoist has been preserved. In order to analyse a timber frame, scientists base their work notably on one science, dendrochronology or tree ring dating. This method of dating is based on several principles. The first one is that every year a tree forms a layer of wood at the periphery of the trunk, called the annual ring. The second principle is the variation in the thickness of the annual rings, which depends primarily on the climate. In order to determine the period when a tree lived, the dendrochronologists take a carrot-shaped sample of approximately 10 mm diameter, obtained by using an auger. They then measure the annual rings. The results of the data obtained for each sample are then expressed as curves. These curves are then compared with the reference curves established for each species and for each region, in order to determine their position in time. Dendrochronology notably enables the dating of timber frames and the buildings they cover. Moreover, in the spirit of an archaeological approach to the construction, dendrochronology is increasingly applied to the entirety of a building in order to establish the different phases of work pertaining to the building. In an in-depth study, it is useful to combine different methodologies: archaeological observation, a historical study, dendrochronological dating, and typological analysis. The Cathedral of Beauvais would be one of the vastest buildings in the world if it had, like other cathedrals, a nave and a church tower. Yet even in its unfinished state, its dimensions are still breathtaking. Its facades are a demonstration of all the richness of Gothic sculpture. The building work on the cathedral lasted an extremely long time. There were funding problems and design defects that led to multiple modifications. The work was started in 1125. The site became a place of worship in 1272. Alas, in 1284, a section of the vaults collapsed due to the effect of the wind on the flying buttresses. The multidisciplinary study of the wood located close to the area of this accident nevertheless showed that the essential part of the original timber frame of the chancel had been preserved. The study of timber frames highlights the fact that wood is a noble construction material, which, at first glance, is often unnoticed. Such studies also permit the creation of a methodology to understand the design of ancient roofs. Such a project takes time and can only be achieved when all the available technologies are involved and contribute. Archaeologists, historians, dendrochronologists, and all the relevant scientists able to help in such projects should therefore continue to work together in the future.